Welcome everyone to a new live session here at Markeco, where I'm on a mission to help a million marketers make the best out of their digital marketing careers by bringing you experts to share tips, tricks, hacks, and most importantly, I think their stories. I think that's been one of the most interesting things about doing these live sessions is just realizing how people end up doing marketing, in this case, marketing ops. Today we have a pretty cool guest, Crissy. She's a co-founder and CEO of CS2 and co-founder of also a board member, Women in Revenue. She's had over a decade of experience in marketing ops. She led teams, marketing op teams at Marketo, at Jive, Agari. She's now the CEO of her own agency. They're #1 Marketo agency, top 3 revenue ops agencies. She's had a lot of experience. They co-host a podcast that I recommend people listening who are into marketing ops. Welcome, Crissy. How are you?
Good. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on, Diego.
No, this is going to be interesting. As I was saying before, I think, when you think about digital marketing and marketing, one of the least steps or things that people think about is marketing ops. Because I feel like when you say ops, it kind of thinks oh man, boring. No one wants to deal with ops because it's not sexy, right? It's not growth. It's not doing ads, doing a lot of different things. But I think it's such a fundamental thing to have as a team. And so I think it's going to be really interesting. And I want to start first with, how did you end up doing marketing ops? Because I don't think it's a career or a choice where people think okay, I want to do marketing ops. You kind of end up doing marketing ops in a way, but what's your story? How did you end up doing this?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Part of the problem with marketing ops too is that people don't normally know they want to get into it. They kind of just learn on the job. But I was very lucky. I think I came out of college and I'm from San Jose, California, which is basically, Silicon Valley and Bay Area. And I went to Cal Poly and I studied marketing, but I always thought that I was going to do marketing for a brand, and I was very interested in the food industry, so I thought I wanted to do that. But it was 2010, and we were just coming off a recession, and I moved back home, and then I kind of realized, well, I don't know what kind of job I'm going to get, but I need a job, and I ended up finding an internship off of Craigslist of all places for Marketo. And Marketo is one of the leading B2B market automation platforms. And I started that job and I kind of just did everything. I was just so enamored with marketing, all the stuff that you could do. And I just, from day one, I was like, anything there is to do, I'll do it. I was just working so much, but just because I wanted to, take everything in. But one of the things I realized is not very many people at Marketo were using Marketo. There was one person running marketing ops there, and there was maybe another person who was running campaigns. And I thought, well, I'm working for a company that sells market automation. It seems really interesting. I'm learning a lot about it just through marketing. And I thought, oh, it could be, let me try this. So my boss was really busy. So I just on the weekends would teach myself Marketo and, teach myself about lead scoring and all of the kind of, how you set up your workflows and smart campaigns and the integration to Salesforce. And because I did that, I was able to then come in and then say to my boss, okay, I can start doing this. I want to start, creating our emails or start working through projects, and then quickly took that on. And so I went from more of a marketing kind of generalist, and I got promoted. Obviously, I wasn't an intern anymore, and I ended up being a coordinator, and then later ended up, liking it so much and building out our group that I was managing now people on the team and running really big marketing operations projects in a really short amount of time. But I think because marketing ops is so valued at Marketo, because just simply
makes
what
sense.
we did, I was surrounded by people that they knew how important it was, that I was just able to flourish with my team. And my boss was a really great mentor at the time too. And yeah, so I kind of just, fell into it. And I think that's what a lot of people's experience has been for marketing ops is, especially for us, it's been 11 years now since then, but you just kind of fall into it, I think, which I don't think it should stay that way. And I'll probably end up talking about why I think it shouldn't be that way. But
and what do you say? Because I think there's great overlap, right? Of you have sales ops, but you also have marketing ops.
mm-hmm.
And a lot of times I feel like we're talking about the same thing, or people talk about the same thing, and they're like, "Oh, we need someone for marketing ops," but in reality, you really need someone to manage Salesforce, which is totally different than like marketing ops, I think.
Mm-hmm.
How do you define marketing ops, and how much overlap is it with sales these days? Do you really need to focus just on marketing, or do you need to understand sales as well in order to provide value on the marketing ops side?
Yeah, I do think that there are some like kind of gray areas with that a little bit. It's part of the reason why people, are really focused on revenue ops. But I think for marketing ops, I think for me, it just is all about how do you operationalize the marketing strategy. And I think part of the reason why it's starting to feel a little bit like sales ops too is part of the marketing strategy is also now sales, right? Like the BDRs are part of marketing sometimes, but also part of sales, but they're still setting the process for how they manage leads and what statuses you put them into, how do you set up their workflows. That's all something that marketing ops usually develops. And how do we set up our campaign structure in Salesforce. That's something that a marketing ops person is doing. So I think across the lead, contact, and account objects in Salesforce, if people aren't Salesforce savvy, basically all of your contacts in your database, but it's really like down to marketing ops is kind of managing the operationalization of the strategy against those. So that could be email campaigns, how you track your normal like PPC campaigns, what's the data that you're getting for that, what's your UTM parameters you're using. But then also even beyond all of that, there's even ABM and account strategy. So that also then bridges into I think maybe what people would normally consider sales ops. So that's part of the problem too with marketing ops is that there's just so much that we need to do. And some of that is down to Salesforce, but I think depending on the org, it's like split. A sales ops person might be more focused on revenue or pipeline and running opportunities, enabling the sales team for like managing all of that, where marketing ops is really focused on generating like the actions that will generate revenue. So operationalizing those strategies, tactics to support that, and also the analytics. So we really think of it as like process, people, and then the performance or the data, the analytics around it. And those are kind of the three core areas that marketing ops focuses on.
And for someone, because I think with marketing ops, it's an area that no one hires first, unless you come from Marketo, unless you come from like a team that worked at Marketo or a company that already had and knows the importance of having a strong marketing ops. Most of the time, you kind of end up like just adding software and adding your tech stack and adding complexity, and you have this mess that now you need to fix after 2, 3, 5 years. Where do you start? Because I've heard people say like the first hire you should do for a marketing team is a marketing ops person. But most people don't. Like it's not the first thing you do because it doesn't necessarily correlate or you think about it in terms of like, oh, hiring a marketing ops is going to help me with revenue. You think more like, I just need a paid specialist. I just need like a growth, like a hacker, like that will generate revenue. Where do you start if you're thinking about, structuring your marketing ops if you already have 2, 3, 4 years of operating the business and having a marketing team in place?
Yeah, I think, well, one, I do, to answer the question around like when should someone hire a marketing ops person, I do think as soon as possible, but I do think that potentially also it might dictate how you're hiring your marketing person. So if you have someone who's pretty operationally minded, maybe has a little bit of background in doing the general operations. Like I've been that role at companies where I also have done demand gen. So after Marketo, I wanted to expand my marketing like chops. I wanted to I love marketing in general too. it's part of the reason why marketing ops is cool to me, because I touched everything, right? I touched like customers, I touched prospects, and I got to see all the campaigns and what performed, and also provided like best practices to my teams as far as like copy and everything. So, and I have like an English background in writing that I really enjoy. So I ended up doing demand gen. And for that company, it was great because I ended up doing both for a while. And we were very small. We only had about like 60 employees when I joined. And so that was fine then for that size. But I think if your marketing team is more than like 4 people, and we only had 4 people. So it was fine as long as someone, but I think because it worked because I was operationally minded, but I could work on the demand and campaigns. But the thing is, there's always way too much to do on the operations side.
Yeah.
So that's when I do think that hiring someone to handle up marketing ops as soon as possible is great, or partnering with an agency as early on as you can too, to help you set that foundation. And they can even train someone on your team, or even if you bring on a more junior person, they can, be a mentor to them. Because I think part of the problem with marketing operations talent, like we talked about, you fall into it. And that's been a big problem, that the talent pool for marketing ops is very thin, because you don't learn about it in school. You learn about it on the job. But like you said, it's not the sexiest path. I think people think, it's hard. It's maybe a bit of a grind because there's so much, and it's very technical, which in some cases can be a bit scary to people. So, and most of the people that maybe have that mindset may have already decided early on, I want to go into like engineering. And so then they did that. So we are experience a little bit of this in the marketing ops world, a little bit of like a hiring crisis, actually. Like, it's just very hard to find people, especially from a leadership perspective. So like you said, you got 5 to 6 years in, there's a big mess. There's a lot of technology. Hiring a junior marketing ops person for that job is going to be a challenge, because how do you untangle all of that? Unless then you're partnering with experts like through an agency, or you bring in someone who is more high level. But finding those people who have been doing it for, that amount of time that you need to get to that level is tough. So I'm looking forward to more people getting to marketing ops. I think it's been getting the recognition it deserves. I will say, like, I've been on a podium talking about marketing ops for a while now. And so now I feel like it's nice, like we're getting the attention that it deserves. But hopefully that also means that, people coming out of college will maybe be interested and want to learn about more. But yeah, I do think that for teams, like, the earlier you can hire a marketing ops person, the better. If not, if you get later, try and figure out where you can maybe hire, but also maybe bring in like experts, like an agency or someone who's a bit more high level that can really own that department.
And for someone who is getting into marketing, because I think marketing ops is probably not in people's map of like career choices, right? Like, it doesn't really come up. Like, you don't see it in college. Like, people don't talk about marketing ops, I think, as open as you see it more and more now. What's the best way to get some experience to get into a marketing ops position? Because I feel like the challenge is, when you're thinking about marketing ops, most of the time you're at a point where it's already a mess. Like, you need someone to come in and fix it, instead of someone to come in and learn on the job and fix it. And so for someone who's just getting out of college or starting their careers in marketing, what's the best way to get that experience or that exposure? Because it's a very hands-on job. Like, I feel like you need to have some sort of experience. How do you get that if you don't have it today?
Yeah, I do think that for people coming out of college, a good option for them is go into a company that has a marketing ops team already there. That's hard to find, but I do think that that's a great learning environment, because you're going to have mentors. And what I hope is that there's more and more people that are doing that, so we can get more talent coming out of that, or so their bosses can get leadership experience and get promoted. Because I think part of the hard part about marketing ops is even with someone with a lot of experience, you might be subject to working on less strategic things, like focusing on less strategic projects because you're just so overwhelmed by like how much work you have. But if you had, a way to just take some of those day-to-day tasks that you're doing that are probably below your pay grade, right? Transfer those over to some people who really want to learn, and that will open up time for them. So then now we have a junior set of people that are getting experience. We have now that those people who are doing maybe more junior things, but are now getting the breathing room to like really focus on the strategic way to organize their groups. We've done some workshops on like how to become a strategic marketing ops leader. We're doing one similar again this year with Lean Data at their Ops Stars. We did one last year, and I want more of those people because that's where you find a bit of a pinch. Like you said, you need someone who's really going to understand, like, how do we fix this? What methodologies are we going to use? But the problem is not all marketing ops people will even get to that level because they're so burdened by like getting campaigns out the door, fixing fires and all that stuff. So that's I think for anyone coming out of college, I hope that they go to groups who have those teams. There's also some agencies who will hire junior talent, and that's a good entryway too, because you get exposure to a lot of different projects and you're learning from like some of the best people doing it. So an agency is another thing. And then I will say, for anyone who's interested in marketing ops, it's a very great career. It's a lucrative career too, because not a lot of people do it. So there's a supply and demand issue. And so if you are interested in broadening, I will say be proactive. Like there's, you could start off with like HubSpot. They have a great website to just learn about HubSpot, do the certification. That's a great entry level. The way that HubSpot operates is very similar to the way a lot of the marketing automation platforms operate. And that's a good stepping stone. You can do a lot of that without even being a HubSpot customer. And then you can maybe, start to look for, at the same time, maybe work for a company that uses it. And then there's also the last thing I will say, there is a one company called Highway Education who is just coming up, and they have started programs where you can actually get training for marketing ops, and you actually get paired with mentors, and they'll hopefully guarantee you even a job after that training. It's a few months, and you do have to pay for that, but only once you get a job. And so it's like you're paying tuition, but only once you do end up getting placed in a job, and then the amount of tuition you get to pay over time. So it's kind of and they're focused on getting people from different backgrounds, different parts of the country, into marketing ops, because it feels like right now it's very like, there's not a lot of diversity from people, their background. And so I love what they're doing. We're hopefully going to be partnering with them too to potentially hire some of their talent, and excited to see what comes out of that.
And you mentioned hiring crisis a lot. And so for a company who's looking to hire a marketing ops person, what are some tips that you think people take into account? Because a lot of times I've seen as well is we kind of think of this super wide spectrum of abilities that the person needs to have, and it becomes too much. Like I think kind of have to end up picking like either you get someone who is in B2B or B2C, or someone who has experience in like product led or sales led, or you get someone who worked in sales, or someone who came from demand gen. Like you can't really, it's really difficult to find the full spectrum of abilities. What are some tips that you think people should take into account to make this hiring easier and finding maybe not the right person, but a person who can actually grow into the role that you're looking for?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think one of the things that I think is like finding someone who is like comfortable with data. I will say marketing ops, if you just strip down everything, it's like manipulating data, deciding what to call data, where to put it, where to send it, and like how to analyze it. If we really like trimmed it down. So like people, like for your paid campaigns, it's really like, okay, what data are we going to capture for those? How are we then going to get that data so that we can then tie it to a campaign? And then how are we going to, like, what are we going to do with those people as far as like label them as, you know, what life cycle they are? It's all management of data in some cases. And then you want to analyze it. And so at the bare minimum, I think finding someone who is comfortable with data and like that concept, I think is a really good place to start. So even I feel like even people with like finance backgrounds actually do really well in operations just because like they
can run the
they're
sheet, the Excel sheets,
yeah.
and yeah.
Yeah. So like databases are really just representations of like spreadsheets, right? The metadata is then formatted in a way where then you have object data, you know, and your different objects and how they correlate. So that type of person that kind of can put that together, I think is good. The second thing though is like someone who's interested in marketing and like what is the, like how do you set that up and also like understands the business. This is a bit hard, but like I think even to that person who's really interested in just the business in general, because then you can prioritize what needs to be done. Like you said, there's too much that you need to do. But if you understand a business, how it runs, how they're focused on revenue, how they need campaigns and like a strategy to then get that pipeline revenue, they're always going to prioritize like campaigns or anything revenue touching rather than like, you know, we need to make sure all of our first names are capitalized or something, which
Right.
For a startup, like that's very low priority. Don't focus on that. Like focus on things that are really going to run the business. And so I will say like for questions, like if someone has a background in like as a marketing manager, but maybe does like really like the data or can run their own reports, that's even someone who can be really good for marketing ops and can grow. And then the third thing, I think someone who has a really good attention to detail. So, and then can have like, be like almost like, so like analyze of thinking forward. So a lot of what marketing ops, and I will say any operations is like, okay, what I'm doing today, what's going to be the downstream effects of that? Because even when you think about all those scenarios, you're still going to have ones that come up. There could be an error somewhere. There could be this. There could be some technical debt in their Salesforce. We deal with that, you know, a lot. And but someone who can think of, okay, if we do this, this needs to happen. So, and then someone who has attention to detail to really pick up on that. Okay, they can like just go through and see, you know, technically like these are all the things, pieces that need to be put in place and can pick up when there's issues. That's also, so when I look at like junior people, I focus on the attention to detail part and like if they're interested in data. And then if I'm trying to find someone who's maybe already been in marketing but wants to go into marketing ops, I really think of someone who has those two, but also is quite interested in like the marketing strategy or understands it at least so that they can prioritize.
And I think the question that I see a lot, and I got this from someone, how do you test that? Because I think with marketing ops, it's easy to read and research yourself, right? And understand how a funnel works and understand the stages and understand like difference between like, I don't know, Marketing HubSpot and like CRMs and Salesforce versus Pipedrive versus, I don't know, you have a lot of options these days. Yeah. How do you test that someone is comfortable doing data and can actually do it, not just like the theory behind it, that is analytical, that is interested in marketing, and is also has attention to detail?
Yeah.
How do you, what do you recommend doing during like the whole interview and recruitment process to make sure that the person that you're hiring does have those qualities and can actually execute?
I mean, this is a great question. And I will say, Diego, like I'm learning every day, like how do I do this, you know? I think companies are, but we've even taken the approach recently to like, depending on the level, but really do scenario based like questions. And I would even say, don't even, you know, so, you know, there's some of those like mind, like kind of puzzles, like,
yeah, like how many golf balls can you fit in a bus?
Yeah, or like I think the ones like a bat and ball together are $1.50. If the bat is $1, how much is the ball? Like something like that, like where you can really they like need to think, and it's not like the obvious thing, right? And that's the thing with marketing ops. If it was the obvious thing that you do, it would be simple, right? It's never that way. It's like, okay, no, we can't do that because then it would do this. So like understanding that from like just a rudimentary, you can't get anything from them around like Marketo or HubSpot or Pardot because they haven't used it before. Those type of questions are really good. I think also like showing them, saying a data set that you have. So say you have like certain reports, and if they've already done marketing before, or some marketing ops, you can even say to them like, okay, this is what I see in my reporting. What would be the reasonings for that? Like, what are the effects? Like, how would you, if you were going to talk to the CMO, like, how would you position that? And so I think giving them like very scenario based questions, and like 3 problems that I've given like a very early stage person to get hired onto marketing ops is all focused on kind of like a nurture setup. Tell them this is the audience I want to go after. You know, this is how, like, based on these events, this is how I want to nurture them. What would be a way you would set that up? And they would actually need to like tell you exactly. If you're looking for someone that knows exactly how to do it in a specific tool as well, make them tell you that too. And then other things are like around, you know, you have a certain amount of the pipeline you need to generate, and then tell them your conversion rates, and then they need to do like a reverse waterfall to figure out what those goals are. That's a really good problem to ask as well, because it gives you insight into like if they're able to understand, oh, I need to do that reverse and do the goal setting, because that's really important for marketing, is if marketing ops can actually help you develop those goals. And then the third thing is understanding like attribution. So like if you're seeing that a certain channel like field marketing is, you know, their opportunities are not getting enough, their programs are not generating enough opportunities, what are the reasons for that? But then they're touching revenue and getting influence from there. Why? And if they're able to answer that, and that's typically because, you know, field marketing touches opportunities that are already existing and help them to close. Like someone who can understand the business, like that's a really good one. Like, okay, we're seeing this happening. Why? It's because they understand how marketing works, and then they've given that data to those groups before. So those are a few examples.
I like the approach of showing a dashboard and saying like interpret it. Like, what do you see?
Right.
Like, what would you say if you were presenting this to management? Like, is this good? Is it bad? Like, what are some insights? I think that's a really good way to like make it super applicable to your business, and at the same time, like, even if you change the numbers a bit, like that's fine, right? But like, I think it's like a real-time approach of what do you see? How would you fix? Like, what are some metrics? You even include like go back and like do the waterfall, like back, like these are our conversion rates. Like if we wanted to increase 2x sales, like what needs to change? Like, is it like increase leads, increase MQLs, you know, PQLs, whatever you're using in your funnel. And the last thing I want to ask is, we've had here people talk about sales and talk about like your sales. Andrew, he does a lot of sales, and he mentioned like the ramen sales stack. And he's like, these are like, you know, if you don't have money, if you're getting started, like these are the bare minimum things that you should have in terms of tools to get started. That's cheap with like $200-$300. You can get started with like doing a lot of sales, do a lot of ABM. Like it doesn't need to be complex. What's your go-to ramen martech?
Yeah. Well, I will say that if you have a marketing automation platform, right then and there, like you can do so much, because like I honestly think for certain things like you know, lead to account matching. I would say like 11 years ago, we didn't have things like lean data, right? So I had to build out models where I just set up in my marketing automation platform lists of like domains or company names of my target accounts. It would listen for anyone who matched that, and then I would mark a custom field that would be in like Marketo, HubSpot, or whatever, or Salesforce. Like, so once you understand the power of being able to do things like that, right? Like manipulate data or listen for triggering events, I could do something. That right there with the marketing automation platform opens up a huge world of opportunities. So I will say like having a marketing automation platform, number one, is key. And most companies have one, because like you can't really just like run your business just you know, off of just a tool that sends emails very long if you want to get better insights. And then I will say, like, from an ABM, I think when every time you add on a new tool, you need to remember that someone needs to manage it. And so, like I said, marketing ops teams are understaffed. And so I do think you need to be very selective on like what you're adding on. And really that depends on the goals of the business. So that's one of the things about a strategic marketing ops person. They don't just like let their team just pick whatever tools they want. Sometimes this happens because they feel like they don't have a voice and because like they don't, maybe they're not seen as valued, but I think that'll change. I think CMOs are realizing that needs to change. They need to be the person that's running those evaluations, taking whatever the goals or even OKRs of like marketing team and figure out, okay, what tools can support that. If it doesn't match any of that, we don't need to use it because just one more thing you need to manage. So I will say I'm not a huge fan of shelfware. So I think especially for small teams starting out with like your marketing automation platform, if you maybe want a tool that will help you with so like lean data is a good example. Yeah, like lean data is a really good one because like lead routing is really challenging out of Salesforce. Like it only route new leads, but if you want anything like more advanced than that, and if you want to match your leads to accounts, or if you want to do any like conversions, that's a really great tool. So I think that, and that usually falls on marketing ops is defining, okay, how are we going to route our leads and whatnot, and you can do a lot from there. And then I think like for everything else is more tied to what your marketing strategy is. So if you're ABM focused, I think, that might be tied to whatever tactics you want to do. So maybe adding on like something to automate direct mail, anything that will automate, like create less work for the team rather than more work. I'm a huge fan of.
and another thing that I was going to ask real quick, because you mentioned attribution, and I know we've had people here come in and talk about how that's affecting Facebook ads and Instagram ads and like paid advertising. From a marketing ops perspective, with the changes of iOS 14.5 or with Facebook and paid channels, and now with like 0.15, iOS 15 with like email marketing, how that's affecting attribution as well. What changes are you seeing, and like how should people prepare for it, or how are you preparing companies for this change in what's going to happen with attribution?
Yeah. And I think there's an added layer too, like it's even like tracking people, but also now people are coming, but I think we got into too much of like everything we do in marketing needs to be tracked. Yeah. Like we need attribution.
It's a black hole.
Yeah. And it's like, no, because like if you like you wouldn't be doing this, right? You wouldn't be doing your live webinar if you're like, I need a way to track every listener, get them, because it's tricky, right? Or people wouldn't do like the podcasts or videos or ungated content even in some ways out there that they have in the world. But brand is so important, especially for lowering customer acquisition costs. And so I think now more marketers are realizing, shit, things got harder because our brands, like we didn't focus on our brand. We were too focused on just acquiring leads like in a paid way or through paid channels. And a lot of those people got there maybe because they searched for you, but also just through very like low touch points. So like we saw our conversion rates just plummet and we needed a lot of nurturing. It just, what first started out was like, oh, inbound, but then it was like inbound, but not in a way that was very effective. So right. I think marketers need to be more open to kind of implied attribution. So not just having everything on the perfect dashboard, just realizing, okay, what are the KPIs we want to look at? What's the source that we want to do that? And that might even be, okay, looking into Google Analytics on days you run podcasts and seeing like, did your traffic go up, or based on that traffic. I mean, you can even say, give them a custom URL at the end or something like that. And there's ways you can tie that back, but I think you need to be open to that. And then as far as like all the implications around like with the changes, I think that it's still something that's evolving, to be honest. I think
like, do you think we're going back to basics of like just make sure that your funnel is working properly, like make sure that it's growing, make sure that like don't lose sleep because attribution is not working, which I think a lot of companies end up spending like hours and months of like what you said, right? Like we have to make sure the attribution is working properly. And in the end, it's like, well, yeah, you can have good attribution, but if it's not growing, if your funnel is not moving and it's moving quicker and it's growing, like then what's the point? Like who cares?
Exactly. I think that we, in some ways, will lose sight of like common sense when we get too focused on problems like that. It's really hard to say that to a marketer who wants to track everything, right? But I do think that it will actually cause more alignment. So like marketing should be focused with sales on like the same number. Is our revenue going up? And that even brings it down to even just metrics in general, like the MQL, which causes issues because marketing's focused on one metric, but then the rest of the team's still focused on revenue, and sometimes they don't really like correlate. But I do think that more and more is going to come down to like the basics you said, and focusing on like, are things going up and to the right? Are conversion rates reducing? And then what insights based on what we have can maybe give us some telling signs into why that's happening? Because really data at that level is just to help us make better informed decisions around like, where should I put my money next? How much? Or how is our content offers like working? And what are the best channels to promote those? And it's like directional data. It shouldn't be marketing saying like, this is exactly what we're like influencing, because marketing sales teams should know marketing's probably touching everything.
Yeah.
So it should never be a war of like, what's marketing doing? It's like marketing's probably touching like everything that even sales is even touching, because you know, sales reaches out to someone even outbound, they're going to go to the marketing website, they're going to look at content, they're going to do something. So it shouldn't be that war between those teams. Unfortunately, it always is, and that I think people look to attribution to actually just show their worth. And I think marketing, you don't need to do that. That data is actually more for you to make better decisions, and that'll keep helping you get more up and to the right.
No, those are all good points. I think, how can people get in touch with you? How can people know about CS2? And I don't know if you want to share a bit about Women in Revenue. I think it was a really cool initiative. I went through the website and it seems like you're doing exactly what we just talked about, which is how do we help get more people, or women especially, into marketing ops, into revenue. So I don't know if you want to share a bit about that and how people get in touch and get involved.
Yeah, definitely. Well, first off, if you are interested in learning more about marketing ops, I would go to cs2marketing.com. We have a weekly podcast called Forward Thinking, so FWD:thinking, and you'll find that on our website too, or on your favorite like podcast channel. And then definitely, womeninrevenue.org. We started about 3 years ago almost, and we're upwards of over 5,000 members. We support women entering marketing, sales, and customer success. And we want to try and achieve like 100% equity. And we have a lot of new announcements coming soon about how we're going to do that. But our main programs are around like mentorship and education. So if you want to sign up to be a member, it's free. You can go to womeninrevenue.org.
Awesome. We'll be sharing the links both for CS2 for the podcast and for Women in Revenue on the links on our social media. Thanks again for joining us today. If you are into marketing ops or hadn't even thought about it, I think it's one of the most important things you should be doing as a company, and even as a marketer. I think you should learn the fundamentals of marketing ops. So thanks again for joining us, Crissy, today. Hope you have a good week and enjoy your weekend.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me. It was fun.
Thanks. Bye-bye.